Do you like candy corn?
No.
See, I don't either. And I thought most people didn't like candy corn, but I'm obviously wrong because they sell a ton of candy corn. And last year at a Halloween party thing I was at, I saw a ton of people eat candy corn. But today, for the intro, as we get into this today, I wanted to give us a public service announcement. I've given these before. Usually it's relating to some sort of beverage. Today it's about some kind of food, candy corn, right? As this is our spooky Halloween episode. But I have an important PSA for you guys today. Candy corn can kill you. Yeah, I know, and I'm not joking. The American Chemical Society came out with an article in 2016 to warn Halloween trick-or-treaters to be careful about their candy intake. And I want to do the same thing for you. This article states that the LD50, do you know what the LD50 is?
I have no idea.
It stands for median lethal dose of 50%, right? So they test it on rats. They don't test it on humans because apparently I guess that's, you're not supposed to do like life or death tests with humans, I guess. The LD50, I guess, basically just means 50% plus. And so according to this article and according to this study, it's based off a lot of averages, it would take exactly 1,627 candy corns to kill a human adult. So that seems like a lot, okay? But this Halloween, I want you to know that you should not eat 1,627 candy corns. And how do they figure that out, you wonder? Well, it's based off of, like I said, averages. But basically, the average amount of sugar it takes to kill someone, so sugar to be toxic,
Okay.
the LD50 of that, right, is... I didn't even write down the exact number, but it's like so many... ounces per pound of human, right? Basically, there's 1.5 grams of sugar in every single candy corn. And so whatever 1.5 grams times 1,627 is the lethal dose for at least 50% of rats, which they assume is, plus or minus somewhat true for humans, right? And there's no way to really tell. And so this is just a public service announcement to be careful. But what I want you to know is that candy can kill you. The smaller you are, the less it takes. So children, so kids, be careful with your candy corn this year.
Welcome to the Factoid podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name is Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys.
So, Chris, I just spent a week traveling around the American Southwest in a camper van. During my time in the Southwest, I can report that while I did not see any wild horses, I was hearing news stories about starving wild horses, and they were just like dying around the area of Page,
Really?
Arizona, all right around the time when I was there. So we can move on from that, but I did want to report.
I'm glad you thought about it while you were there because it'd be a missed opportunity if you didn't.
Constantly. I was on the lookout. I'm just knife and fork in hand, like ready to go. But overall, though, the van life did treat me pretty well. This was my first time staying in a camper van. I guess you'd say I stayed in it. I lived in it, whatever. But I think part of the reason that I really enjoyed it is you get this feeling like you're kind of on the fringes of society. Like you're doing this thing that's like quasi-legal. I'm not living in a house. I'm not staying in a house at night. I'm like living in this thing that I shouldn't be living in.
Sure.
And I've got like the row of seats turns into a queen-sized bed. And it's like a super comfortable bed. But if you just walked into the van, you wouldn't know, like, oh, that's clearly the bed. I have like a table in the back that I can like take down and hide and stuff. And we would stay on public lands a lot. And you would just be driving down the highway and there will just be like a dirt road pull off that doesn't have any signs. And you just take a right. You go past a fence and then maybe you see a sign that says that you're in the right place and you just kind of pull off a couple miles into the wilderness at a pull-off spot and you just live there for 2 days. So I think part of the allure is just that like it kind of feels like you're getting away from normal, acceptable society in a way. But there are definitely some disadvantages. For example, no showers.
Sure.
Also, no bathrooms. And we were definitely prepared. We had borrowed some of those little doggy poop bags from our
Okay.
friends. We thought, like, if push comes to shove, we may need these bags. And they had a dog, so they gave the bags to us. Thankfully, we did not have to use them.
Good.
Thankfully, some of the sites we stayed at were like a mile from a gas station, so it wasn't too bad. But yes, I cannot deny there are some disadvantages to that living arrangement of not always being near an easy bathroom. So what if there was a way that you could have that like sense of adventure of like maybe doing something illegal with your lifestyle, but you also still had all the comforts of home? I want to tell you about phrogging.
Phrogging.
Yes. Before I tell you what phrogging is, what do you think it is?
Well, I've heard people say frogging like when you're going to go hunt frogs. Like, I'm going frogging. That's the only like guess I would have.
Yeah, no, it is definitely not that. So phrogging is the act of living inside somebody's house without them realizing it.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's spelled with a PH instead of an F. I don't really know why they do it that way, but phrogging, like the reason they call it phrogging though, is it's kind of imitating the idea of like a frog leaps from one lily pad to the next.
sure.
And in the same way, a frogger would be going from one house to the next, living in one and then living in another one. Because you see that like a good frogger is able to get out of the house in the one living arrangement before they're caught. And what makes it scary is we only have information about the bad ones. We only know about the ones who weren't good and did get caught. And I also want to clear up the difference between phrogging and squatting, because like when I heard this at first, I thought like, isn't that just what squatting is?
Right.
The main difference is that with squatting, the assumption is you are living in this house that you are very sure it is abandoned. Like the assumption is no one lives here, no one's coming back for it. I'm taking this for
Like
myself.
a foreclosed on or like a falling in old building.
Yeah, exactly. So with phrogging, there is some sort of knowledge, or you at least are pretty confident. Like in some situations, like you know someone's living there because you scouted it out ahead of
Sure.
time, and you know that there's a spot where you're going to stay. For other people, sometimes it's like I moved in when no one was here. I knew they were coming back, but I didn't care. I used this as my opportunity to get in while they weren't noticing it as
So,
much.
not to get off track, but would it be phrogging if you stay in someone's like vacation home when they're not there? Or is that squatting?
I think that is a gray area in between, because
Sure.
I think you could make an argument for it both ways, because like,
Because they're coming back.
right.
But you don't know when they're coming back. But
Right.
they're probably not going to be there very much.
I would lean towards calling that phrogging.
Okay.
But I'm not the authority on this
Sure,
at this point. So there have been plenty of cases where celebrities have actually been the victims of phrogging.
Okay.
And I think there are plenty of reasons why they're more likely to have people phrogging in their houses. Their houses are huge. More rooms makes it easier. They also travel a lot. So there's more times when they're gone for a few days and it's easy for someone to slip in. And one of the more prolific phrogging cases with a celebrity was with P. Diddy.
Okay.
So P. Diddy had a fan who would frequently live in his house while he wasn't around. He would go in, he would shower with his soap, he would put his clothes on, he would brush his teeth with his toothbrush, and he would even sleep in his bed. And this guy joins Kesha as one of the only people who can say that they woke up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy. So in addition to P. Diddy, Jennifer Lopez, Brad Pitt, George Michael, and Pamela Anderson are all celebrities who have been victims of phrogging. The Pamela Anderson one was actually pretty scary because like they finally caught the woman and she was wearing her iconic Baywatch outfit.
No way.
And Pamela knew that Baywatch outfit was hanging up in her bedroom.
Oh,
So it was just a like very horrifying time.
That's creepy.
I can't imagine living through that. But it does not just happen to celebrities, Chris. One of the most famous phrogging cases happened 10 years ago in Columbus on Ohio State campus.
wonderful.
So there were a few people who lived in this house. The two of the ones that I've heard the most about were Mark Hartman and Brett Muglin. And they were Ohio State students and lived on campus in this large house. It was split into two parts. And I think between the two parts, there may have been 10 people living there. you and I both went to private colleges, so we don't understand this life as much. But from all of my friends that I know who lived at Ohio State, there are plenty of houses, even if you weren't in a frat, where there may be like 8 to 10 guys living in one house together.
Okay.
So this is a pretty common occurrence that like, you know who your roommates are, but there's plenty of people coming and going that maybe you aren't that like you might not know who that person was.
Sure.
So they move into this house for the year, and they're down in like the basement. They're getting the tour or whatever, and eventually like they find a door, like a locked door in the basement, and they just assume that this leads to the utility closet. So of course it's locked. They can't go there. Only the landlord can get in. But after living there for a couple of months, they start to notice strange things happening. They will like tell their friends about how like their house is haunted because the microwave door was just open one night, or at one point, like all the lights were off, but then when they woke up in the morning, there was just one light on, and no one knew why that light was turned on in the house. And they would find kitchen cupboards opened up randomly. And Brett, one of the boys, that right towards the beginning of the school year, he had seen a guy kind of hanging out on the property, and he assumed it was one of the guys in the other half of the house that like wasn't connected.
Right.
So he was saying like, "Oh, it's so cool! I get to meet my neighbors and stuff." And the guy's kind of being weird and not really like saying, "Yep, I'm your neighbor." And the most the guy would say is that his name was Jeremy. So another unique thing about the house that they were living in is they were having a lot of problems with their electricity. So someone would have to go down to the basement, flip the breaker, and then come back up. I mean, these are probably old bad houses. It makes sense they would have these problems. But that meant there was a lot more foot traffic down into the basement near that locked door than normal. So occasionally people would be down there and they would hear what sounded like an alarm or a ding noise. Noises that they weren't, like you might think maybe this is from some sort of piece of equipment down there, but maybe it's not. Well, I don't know what's going on. And eventually the housemates, they started to think something more nefarious was happening, and they call their landlord, and they eventually call the police, and they bust down the door, and Jeremy had been living in their basement for months. It was like a full college dorm setup. He's got
way.
like bedroom. He has a sink. He has a toilet. He has like his all of the things you would expect, like pictures of your family on the mantle. Whatever, you don't have a mantle, but you get what I mean.
Yeah,
like posters
he's, like,
on the
decorated
wall.
it.
Yes, like enough. He felt safe enough that he had decor, and he had like plenty of food and drinks down there. And what really kind of started to solve this whole situation was there was a back entrance to get out of the house. There was like a side entrance to the house that he had access to. And that is how he was able to get in and out of this house with no one ever seeing him. And when they busted down that door, though, Jeremy was not there. And I did a little bit of digging. I don't know if anyone ever found Jeremy. And what I do know is as people are starting to kind of put two and two together, they realized that Jeremy had been living in the house the previous school year, and he was actually a student at Ohio State. I don't know if he had dropped out since then or graduated or what, but I know all of his roommates had left for the year, and they decided they weren't coming back to live in that house. So they all moved out, and Jeremy just kind of said, "I want to stay." And
so he did.
He did, and he didn't tell anybody, and he didn't make enough noise for people to know, and he got away with it for a few months. And overall, the housemates, I watched an interview that like the student newspaper did at the time, and like the kids in the house are like, "Well, he wasn't that bad of a guy. Like he didn't do anything bad to me, but like just because he wasn't playing tricks on them doesn't mean that it could have been so much worse for these guys." And I'll admit that I haven't been in my basement a lot recently. There's a lot of dead bugs down there that I need to clean up and stuff, but I may have to start going down there more often because there's plenty of space for a frogger to live.
So, Payton, in 2016, there's an article from Vox.com that says this: Americans are more afraid of clowns than climate change, terrorism, and death.
Wow. I believe it, though.
Clowns are scary. Are you scared of clowns?
I would say I have a healthy amount of colrophobia, yes.
Okay, yes, colrophobia, that's what it's called, right? 42% of Americans are at least somewhat afraid of clowns. Like, that doesn't mean they're terrified and would never think about it or whatever, but like they have some sort of unsettling feeling in their mind when they think of clowns. That statistically means that more than 4 people in a room of 10 people have unpleasant feelings towards clowns. That's pretty crazy. That means they're uneasy around them, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, that means that more of a population group of Americans are afraid of clowns than a terrorist attack happening, the death of themselves or a family member, climate change, and even one of the most, what I thought was the most common fears, heights. Clowns are objectively scary.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this for a while because, like, again, I don't think I'm scared of clowns, but like I definitely am leery in the presence of clowns, right? Not like I'm in the presence of clowns.
I was about to ask, how often are you hanging out with clowns?
Not that much, but enough. I have enough times in my life, like at town events where there's a clown juggling or circuses where you see clowns, like that you just feel a certain type of way. You know what I mean? Like you feel a little different.
There's
right?
a little bit of evidence of my mom dressing up as a clown for like one of my siblings, like some sort of grade school carnival thing. I think she called herself Bobo the Clown for this.
Okay.
But like, I don't want to go back and try to find that evidence.
Yeah, you don't want to see that. That's just too much to think about.
Yeah.
Like, again, clowns. There's enough people in America specifically, but in the world as a whole, that it can be said clowns are objectively scary. And I've been thinking about this for weeks, months even, since I knew we were going to do a Halloween episode. I want to know why are clowns scary? Because like they started out literally hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Like there's like court jesters and stuff, but there's clowns like circus clowns hundreds and hundreds of years ago. These are supposed to be entertaining things for kids and for families. How did something so sweet and kind and happy turn into this fear thing? And it's like not just like you learn to become afraid of them, like you are born instinctually scared of clowns. At least 46% of people are. Why is that the case? And it's just so interesting to me. And we've talked about this before, but we often send each other a GIF of what we're going to talk about before, because we don't know. We don't talk about it before. And today, and I sent you a GIF of Mr. Rogers putting on a clown mask, and your response was, "That's horrifying." Okay, and it's crazy because it means like Mr. Rogers is like this symbol of like peace and happy and calm.
Yeah,
and like clown mask is like the opposite of that, which is crazy. Because again, how do we get to that point?
Right.
How do we get to the point where clowns mean evil and Mr. Rogers means happy? You know what I mean?
Right.
But like that's just what it is. That's how it is.
Now that makes me wonder, in like 50 years, are people going to think Mr. Rogers is evil?
See, I don't know. I don't know. I've never actually, I know there's a bunch of movies and stuff about him, but I've heard he has a checkered past, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I don't know how many of the things are true or not, but yes, I know it is not all
right.
I think he was able to find his peace later in life,
Yes.
and that show was his outlet.
Correct. But I kind of think it's fascinating. Clowns, objectively scary. Why are clowns scary? And so to find out, we need to explore a couple different things. But first, we need to explore what makes anything scary to begin with. So in my research, I looked this up, and you'd be surprised to know there's not that much scientific research on what makes things scary, which is interesting because like horror movies are a huge genre. And I don't know if people just base what works in a horror movie off of horror movies that have worked. You know what I mean? Or if they just think of what's the scariest thing I can think of, and I'm going to put it into this media art form. Like, I don't know how they create that, but there's not, at least that I could find, there's not that much actual scientific testing evidence about why things are scary and what makes certain things scary. Because I think maybe it's so personal, right? Everybody's scared of their own things and their own experiences make things scary. But what makes something scary? What is considered creepy to begin with? There is a study on creepiness done by the Department of Psychology at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, which is really close to where I grew up.
Nice.
And it says that when asked statistically, the people in the test, it's like over 1,000 people. It's not a huge data set, right? But when asked specifically, 95% of all people, men and women, said that men are seen as creepier than women. So like all men and women consider men creepier than women.
Sure.
Which is interesting. I mean, it's true, probably.
I would agree.
Yeah. And so it's not like just women find men creepier. Like everybody considers men creepier than women. And this kind of lines up because when clowns began, it was an incredibly all male dominated. A lot of things at the time were, but male dominated, right? But what's interesting is as time has moved on, it seems that clowns have only gotten scarier And this is a stat I didn't expect to read. 65% of clowns are women now. 65%. So it's a female dominated area, which is wild, right? So
yeah, they're just squirting the glass ceiling with their little flower that shoots out water.
That's right. So it's like that might have made sense at one point in time that maybe just loosely connected to men being clowns, like that's scary, right? Whatever. But that's not actually what it is. And so I guess creepiness, men are just considered creepier. When do you find yourself creeped out? Is there like a specific time? Like I can think of times where like I'm walking around in a big building alone and you always hear stuff, right? And, and it's creepy. It's just because you don't know, you're assuming no one's there, but you just don't know.
Yeah. Definitely like if I am in an office building after hours, there's not a lot of light that's on, and eventually you got to turn the lights out and lock up. But oftentimes, one of the only light sources that's coming from these dark office buildings are the exit signs that are bright red. And I think that definitely is like a creepy situation.
I think if you're in a place like an office building or just a big building where people normally are and people aren't, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Or if you're in the presence of a place where a person is and there isn't usually a person, that's also creepy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you go in a parking lot, like a parking garage, and there's one car, but then there's another car, like your car that you're going to, but there's one other person in a car, like on the other side, and you're thinking, why? You know what I mean? And again, it's probably unfounded, but it's creepy. And so there's unsettling things that creep us out. And in this, they talked a little bit more about that stuff in that scientific study, but mostly it ended up being about gender, which is whatever. But the next thing that comes to mind, the next thing that through researching this is something called the uncanny valley.
Ooh.
You know, are you aware of the uncanny valley?
I wrote a paper in high school for my English class on the uncanny valley.
Okay, so I've heard the term. I didn't really know what that was, okay? And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, long story short, the uncanny valley is this thing where like, if something looks human, we feel comfortable around it, right? Mm-hmm. But then like, and it's talking, I think, a lot about robots and stuff, where like if something looks human but not quite, it's very unsettling to us. And that's like the uncanny valley thing, right?
Yes. But on the opposite side of the valley, you have something that doesn't look like us. So like a cartoon character, if they're very cartoony, that like it's on the opposite end of the valley, and we think it's cute.
Sure,
and, like we are fine
because
with
it's so far from reality that it's like this is its own thing. But if it's close enough to humanity, if it's close enough to us, then it's like creepy, right? Yep. And so there's this idea that things that look pretty much right but not quite right is creepy. And this is like a hypothesis. It's a scientific thing that it's like true. That's like how our minds work. We don't know why. They don't really know why that's how things work, right? But I think a piece of this comes into play with clowns, because clowns traditionally for so many years they're just people, right? But they're like arranged in such a way that they just don't look quite right? Like their emotions are being masked, right?
Yeah.
They have these smiles painted on their face. They have big, colorful hair and the shoes that are huge and the honk nose, you know? And like, it looks like a person. It looks like a cartoon character, but it's not either way enough for it to be its own thing. It's scary, right?
Yeah.
And psychology shows us that if we can't tell what someone's thinking, we don't like that. And so clowns are like almost designed so that they just look a certain way all the time. And so this paint and the way they're made up and their attitudes, it all points to not knowing what this person is thinking, right? And so that could go into it. That could be a piece of it. And as I researched this, I was honestly expecting to Google why are clowns scary, and there would be an answer. You know, like how Google gives you little cards, and I was expecting to be like, clowns are scary, but that's not what happened, right? That's not what I found out. But basically, so I guess recap, it's not because they're men, because they're not all men, but you know, whatever, right? They've been around for a long time. Maybe it's because they look familiar, but not familiar enough. Maybe it's because we can't tell what they're thinking. Maybe it's because of various other things. I don't know. But clowns make us unsettled. And there's actually a big thing with this resemblance to people, and there's a big thing on the internet this week. You might have seen it, where this museum in Paris made a wax figure of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Have you heard this?
This is great.
So they just made this artist made this new wax figure of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and it looks just like him, except he made a couple errors. His skin was a little too smooth, and his skin color was a little too light. Okay?
And instead of the people's eyebrow, they gave him the people's nose.
Right,
I don't know.
And so like it looked like The Rock, okay?
Yeah.
But it didn't look enough like The Rock that people were happy, right? They were like, this doesn't look like Rock. And it's kind of interesting and it's creepy. And the guy's actually come around and he's fixed this thing, right? To be more true to who The Rock is and show his true skin color and all this stuff, right? But it's this thing where as soon as everyone saw that, they're like, that doesn't look enough like him. Like, I don't think that's okay. That's not right. So I really do think the Uncanny Valley thing has a part to do with maybe why our minds are scared of clowns. Maybe why we initially became scared of clowns. But I think there's one more factor that probably is the biggest reason, at least in my opinion, what I would think would be the biggest reason that causes the most trouble in the area of coulrophobia, okay? Pop culture.
Yeah.
And this is like almost like the Nickelback episode we talked about, right? Like people say, do you like Nickelback? And you say no. And so if you say yes, it's like people tell you can't like Nickelback, so you don't, right? And so I think that's a piece of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because of pop culture. People say like, oh, do you like clowns? Or are you scared by clowns? Oh yeah, they're terrifying and my family's scared of them. Oh, I'm scared of them too. Whatever, right? It's like you're supposed to be, so you are. But I think that it's mainly because of pop culture. There are countless examples of scary, evil clowns in media and in books and in movies and in TV. Everywhere you look, pop culture today, clowns are scary. And I believe that one of the first, like, widest, most mainstream instances is in the 1980s book and 1990s movie written by Stephen King, It, where the clown is Pennywise. And it's this evil being that presents itself as a clown in the book. It's pretty crazy. I've read the book. I watched the old movie. I've seen the new movie. There's a remake of it that came out not too long ago. It's this demonic, evil thing. It's scary. Pennywise is this scary clown. But then I got to thinking about that. Why did Stephen King in 1980, or whatever the book was in the 80s, why did he decide one of my scariest, most evil, what he wouldn't know, but would become one of his most popular villains, why would he consider a clown something he should make that, right? So he obviously had some idea that clowns were perceived as scary. Well, I think pop culture again. And I believe that this is directly connected to the conviction and publicity of the serial killer, John Wayne Gacy.
Oh my gosh, I didn't put that together. Yeah.
He is known, if you don't know, John Wayne Gacy is known for basically stealing and collecting and killing 33 young boys, right? And burying them under his house. Like it, kind of a big thing. It's in the 60s and the 70s. So this is before Stephen King. So I'm assuming, this is just a complete leap, but I would assume that maybe that has something to do with it. But why John Wayne Gacy? Why clowns? What does that mean? Well, it turns out John Wayne Gacy, as he was living his life during these decades, he was a frequent performer at children's birthday parties as Patches the Clown. And so he actually now is known as the Killer Clown. And so Stephen King, I believe, knew this about it, knew that it would at least be a scary thing. It could, I feel like choosing a clown as an evil thing could be considered like goofy. Like even some people think the book is kind of silly, especially like when you watch the old movie, like it's kind of ridiculous. But I think he's playing off of and hoping that it takes hold of like this clown is just going to get scarier and scarier. And I think it has. Countless things in pop culture. Pennywise the Clown, the Joker from Batman, right? In the movie, the Joker, the It remake, Insane Clown Posse. You could probably make a whole new video about these people, right? That's interesting. Twisted Metal video game, Sweet Tooth. You ever played Twisted Metal?
Sweet
There's
Tooth,
like countless examples of evil, scary clowns. We're surrounded everywhere we look in the media by scary clowns. What started out as comedy, what started out as fun and happy and smiley, I don't know that it was connected to fear at the time. Whatever it began has now turned into horror. So I'm here to say I don't think I'm scared of clowns. I'm not scared of clowns. In fact,
do not look behind you, Chris.
That's scary. But I can juggle. I have always wanted to ride a unicycle. I very heavily considered making a rollabola. You know what that is? Like
no.
It's like a board with a pipe where you balance and you can juggle on it. Like I actually believe there's an alternate reality where I am vocationally a clown. Like if I'm not, right? But there's somewhere in the universe where I'm a clown because I think they're interesting. I think it's kind of fun. I'm not scared of clowns, and I'm not a clown. And it seems like I'm kind of glad I'm not, because that means at least 4 out of 10 people in a room wouldn't like me. And I'm pretty sure that's more than now.
I've got a little bonus factoid for you today, Chris.
Okay.
I've been sitting on this one for months, and it's part of the reason why I suggested that we should do a Halloween episode.
Okay.
There was a soda serial killer.
A soda serial killer.
Yes. I want to tell you a story about a serial killing spree that involved putting herbicide in soda in vending machines in Japan.
It's about soda and vending machines and Japan.
Yes. For those of you playing bingo at home, I surely have filled up your card in that one sentence. I'm talking about the Paraquat murders. In 1985, Japan had a brand of soda called Oronamen C. And I don't know if the C stood for vitamin C. It was a citrus-flavored soda. And you can still get it today. It does still exist. I was not able to rush ship it fast enough to have it here, but maybe another time. But Oronamen C has ties to old-timey medicines like a lot of our American sodas do. And the most important thing for you to know about this, though, is that in the 1980s, when you're buying a bottle of Oronamen C, it comes with it has a bottle cap on top, and you're taking off the bottle cap in order to drink it. And the company that manufactured it was running a buy one, get one free deal for a while. So it's a very common sight in bigger Japanese cities like Tokyo to be walking around and seeing an extra bottle of Oronamen C, maybe sitting on top of a vending machine, or it's actually in that bottom slot. Because I guess just with the way their culture was at the time and still is, if you got two, but you didn't think you needed two, and you just felt like you needed one, you would just leave the second one around for someone who maybe someone else needs it. So a serial killer decided to take advantage of this, and he would go and he would take these spare bottles and he would undo the bottle cap and he would lace them with the herbicide called Paraquat, and then he would put the bottle cap back on and he would return them to the vending machines. And Paraquat is one of the most potent herbicides that you can get. There are certain types that are... they say that they're selective, where they're only trying to kill certain types of plants. Paraquat is one that does not discriminate. Like any plant cell it hits, it's going to try to kill. So it's very good at killing plants, and it turns out also people. So 35 people were poisoned by this, and 12 people were killed by the Paraquat in the Oronamen Sea. And it sends Japan into a little bit of a frenzy and a chaos where drink manufacturers have to start putting labels on all of their vending machines and say, like, if you find a spare bottle in here, do not take it, do not drink it. It might be poison. You might die. And they're having to run these PR campaigns just to make sure that people are aware of this and that more people don't die. And it actually leads to the company that makes Oronamen C actually changing the tops of their bottles. And they have like a one-time use pull tab that you had to undo before you could do the rest of the pulling off the top. And to this day, if you buy Oronamen C, it still has that style of cap that they introduced because of the Paraquat murders. So not much is known about the person behind it. And police are pretty confident that it was one person. They could never establish a motive because he didn't seem to target anyone specifically. He would just like pick a vending machine in a certain part of town, lace a few bottles, and then go to another machine. And all the people that were dying and were poisoned, there was no real like connections. It wasn't like they all worked for the government or had this belief or whatever. It seemed very indiscriminate. And people speculate that maybe it was someone who was very stressed and they like wanted an outlet in their life, and they chose a very strange one, I guess. Yes. So they never found him though. So
this dude, when was this?
1985.
So this dude could just be out there still.
Yeah. So the next time that you get a soda from a vending machine, check and make sure that cap is sealed, because if you're not careful, it could be your last. Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. Just as a reminder, we have our next listener episode coming up on Monday, November 27th, which turns out to be Cyber Monday, actually. So we could definitely use some questions. So as usual, though, if you want to learn about something and you don't want to do that research, please shoot us an email at what'syours@factoidpodcast.com, We will do all the research for you, and we can talk about it on that listener episode.
And as always, you can find us everywhere that you find all your podcasts or at our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.